Okay, today we're going to start Ayin Dalet Amid Aleph. It's on the top. Tashma, second to the top line. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. Because of our learning, we should have the basic Mikdash immediately. Okay, we're going back now to a question that was asked of Rav Sheshes. If an uncircumcised person, an Aral, is he allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni? Yeah, but that was our question, and we got slightly distracted with some other background information. Now we say Tashma. Come in here. Let's say you have an Aral, or someone that was circumcised, but he wasn't fully circumcised. There still is little shreds of skin, of the foreskin, that need to be removed. So basically, he's an Aral, halachically. We have a list of 4 things here. Can't eat truma. Yeah, the parak started off that an Aral can't eat truma. That's we understood. A Pesach, we know that from the Psukim. It says clearly that an Aral can't eat from the carbon Pesach. Leiba Kachim, that's Karbanis. Leiba Meiser. Meiser, we're assuming now, my love, Meiser Dagan. It must mean Meiser Dagan, which means Meiser Sheni. The grain, it's tithed, it's taken to Yerushalayim. And he's not allowed to eat, the Aral's not allowed to eat from it. So we have a clear brisa that an Aral can't eat from Meiser. And that's an answer to the question. The Gemara says, Loi, Meiser Behema. It's not dealing with Meiser Dagan, it's dealing with the carbon. Every 10th animal is separated and it becomes a carbon. It's a carbon. And that's what an Aral is not allowed to eat. The Gemara says, Meiser Behema, Hainu Kachim. You said that already. You can't say Kachim and then say Meiser, which means Meiser Behema. You said Kachim and that included Meiser Behema. The Gemara says, 1 second. Pesach, if that's a kasha, then why do you say Pesach? It says V'lei Pesach, V'lei Kachim, V'lei Meiser. Pesach is also Kachim. It must mean that things are getting itemized. So it's not a problem to say that it's Meiser Behema, and then we have no raya. No raya about an Aral eating Meiser Sheni. I can understand why it should have to say Karban Pesach, and it also wants to say Kachim. Ditana Pesach, if it would only teach Pesach, I would think that only a Karban Pesach has an issue of an Aral, but other Kachim, an Aral is allowed to eat from. Someone uncircumcised can eat from a Karban. Aval Kachim a malay, but other Kachim, this would be permissible. Vitana Kachim, and if we were to say Kachim, Havamina my Kachim, Pesach. I could have thought that what's the translation of Kachim? Translation is that it's a Pesach. And other Kachim are still not a problem. It's just a Karban Pesach. Ella Meiser Behema, Lamali, why does it have to say Meiser Behema? Meiser Behema is just a regular Kachim category. Okay, now the Bach amends the gears over here because we're holding right now that Meiser Behema is totally unnecessary for it to say because it said Kachim. So it must mean that it's talking about Meiser Dagan, which is the grain. And in other words, the word Meiser, it's not explained which Meiser we're dealing with. When our question was, is an Aral allowed to eat Meiser? We said that we have a proof over here. It says an Aral is not allowed to eat Meiser. We said, no, that's talking about Meiser Behema. That's an animal Meiser. That's a sacrifice. So we're saying, no, if it wouldn't have needed to say Meiser Behema because we said Kachim. So why does it say Meiser? It must be talking about Meiser Dagan, the grain. Hey, welcome back. So now we have a proof. The Gemara says, according to the Bach's Gersi, added the word, the Dilma Meiser Rishon. No, 1 second. Dilma Meiserishan Vera Meyeri Damar Meiserishan Asalizarim. Maybe it's not dealing with what you're thinking. Maybe it's dealing with Meiserishan, not Meisesheni. Meiserishan doesn't really have sanctity. It's given to the Levi. The Levi can eat it, but it's not like he can't share it with someone. It's just his money. It's just a gift that he gets. However, Reb Meir is of the opinion that Meiserishan does have a certain sanctity, and a non-Levi is not allowed to eat it. So what we're saying over here is maybe this Mishnah is following the opinion of Reb Meir, which we're going to have later on. And when we say Meiser, we're not referring to Meiser Sheni that an Arl is not allowed to eat. We're referring to Meiser Rishon according to Reb Meir that views Meiser as Truma. Just like Truma goes to the Kayan, Meiser goes to the Levi, and no one else is allowed to eat.
A portion of agriculture that goes to the
Levi, yeah. At least in the first temple. Okay. So there goes our whole answer. We don't know anything now about Meiser Sheni. If an Aral, an uncircumcised person, is allowed to eat Meiser Sheni. Because this view is just one, is just an individual opinion, an individual's opinion that we don't follow, and it doesn't tell me anything about Meiser Sheni. Tashima. Come and listen. Midatani Reb Chia bar Rav Difti Aral Asa B'Shtei Meisers. Well, that's pretty clear. Rav Chia bar Rav Midifti says clearly that an Aral is not allowed to eat the two Meisers. Maila, Vechan Meiser Dagan, Vechan Meiser Behema. What are the two Meisers? Meiser Dagan and Meiser Behema. Gemara says no. Hachanami Meiser Rishon v'Reb Meir. I guess the two Meisers would mean still Meiser Behema. But what's the other one? It's the Meiser Rishon. And it's the following the view of Reb Meir. Basically, Reb Meir's view is going to mess up every time it says Meiser. We can always say that it's Reb Meir's view, and then we have no source for Meiser Sheni. Tashima, come and listen. It says, Einin, someone that's in intense state of mourning, Asr b'Meiser. It's not allowed to eat Meiser. That we knew from the pasuk. When he gives his statement, he says, Lo yachalti ba'eini mimenu. I didn't eat from it while I was in Einin. So that means that would have been a prohibition. Umutter b'truma u'bepara. He's allowed to eat truma. An einin can eat truma. That we learned before. It says v'chol zar, that only a zar is not allowed to. V'chol zar lo yochel bay. Only a zar is not allowed to, but an einin is yes allowed to. So an einin can eat truma, and bepara means the preparation of the paraduma. An einin is allowed to do. It's not like a regular carbon. You know, a carbon is a problem unless he's a kohen gadol. Otherwise, a kohen is not allowed to do the service in the temple if he's an einin. But the para is done outside the temple, the preparation. Tvul yaim. Okay, now we're moving on from an einin. Another category of people. Yeah, they must have had, like at the airport, you know, there's people that they check your thing as you walk through here, and then they check it again for some reason. Then they check it, you know, they give me your boarding pass and your ID and your thing. They must have had any relatives, any of this as like checkpoints. Make sure that. Okay, Tvul Yaim. Another person is a Tvul Yaim. Tvul Yaim means that he was tamei and he has gone to the mikvah already, so that's good. But he's still waiting for nightfall. At nightfall, he's going to become pure. So he's Asr b'truma. That we know, it's the first Mishnah in Brachas. That when we recite Shema, when the Kayanim are able to come in to eat their truma. What do you mean eat their truma? They can eat it all day. No, he's tamei, and he went to the mikveh, and at nightfall he becomes tar. Umutter b'para b'meiser. However, at Tvul Yaim, we learned before that since it says v'hatar, v'hiza atar ala tamei. We said the pure person. What does it mean that he's pure? Sounds like he's tamei for something else, but he's pure for this. Remember, we said that. So that means that he's pure. He's considered pure when it comes to red heifer preparation. Uba Meiser, and he can also have Meiser. This is a Tvil Yom. What's Meiser? Probably we don't know yet. Maybe it's Meiser Sheni, and that's what we're discussing.
He can't eat truma, but he can eat Meiser Sheni.
That's what it appears. Mechusar Kippurim. Certain people that are tamei, they have to bring a sacrifice as well. Who would that be? Well, a woman that's given birth, or a zav that saw 3 times. It's not. They go to the mikveh, they wait for nightfall, and the following day they bring their sacrifice. Now, until they bring the sacrifice, they're called mechusar kippurim. They're lacking the atonement. So they're in that state of lacking the atonement. So asr b'para, such a person cannot be involved in the para, in the red heifer preparation. However, mutter b'truma b'maiser. Remember, for truma, he only needed to wait until nightfall, and he did. So he's fine. That's the sacrifice. That's tomorrow. He doesn't have to wait for that. And meiser Israel. Okay. When they say meiser, what are they referring to over here? They're talking about meiser sheni. L'chayr, they're talking about meiser sheni. That an einin must not allowed to eat meiser sheni. And then a Tvil Yom is yes allowed to eat meiser sheni. And a mechusar kippurim is allowed to eat meiser. If he's allowed a Tvil Yom, then for sure mechusar kippurim. Every Tvil Yom is also, well, not necessarily, but if he's missing the sacrifices, if he's missing the nightfall, he's also didn't do the sacrifice, of course. So if he's allowed to eat the meiser, right, because that's the next day. Okay. V'imisa, and if we're going to accept the question that they asked of Rav Sheshes, is an Aral allowed to eat meiser sheni? So we could have said like this. We could have said nisne. We could have had one more category here. Here we were itemizing the different types of people. Could have said Aral asr b'truma. An Aral is not allowed to eat truma. That we learned, right? We went from the carbon Pesach, or maybe it says Yeshish, according to Rabbi Akiva. Umutter b'para b'meiser. And he's allowed to have do the Prara Aduma preparation, and he's allowed to also eat meiser, if he would have been allowed to eat meiser. It must be that he's not allowed to eat meiser. We didn't have any categories here that said mutter b'para v'aser b'truma b'meiser. Why didn't we could have done that? That's an interesting question. Kumar says, "Hi Tana, the way Rabbi Akiva this Tana was from the yeshiva of Rabbi Akiva, the Marbilela Aral Ketame." The reason why we didn't say that is not a proof, because this was also an individual opinion. It was following the view of Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya was taught in a brayso, Rabbi Akiva Imer, Ish l'Rabbi Sesa Aral, that when it says that someone that's tamei is not allowed to eat from the paraduma, I'm sorry, not allowed to eat, not paraduma, it's not allowed to eat from truma. We learned it not from the carbon Pesach, like the other sages that said Taisha B'Sacher is Gzeir Shava. We learned because the first words of that verse says ish ish. A man. We said that extra man was coming to tell me someone that was uncircumcised goes under the category of the people that are tamei. If that's the case, so he can't be involved in the para, in the red heifer. He can't eat truma, and he can't eat meiser. He can't eat meiser sheni either. This is obvious. We weren't asking Rav Sheshes according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva considers him tamei. It says clearly, lo yachalti ba'ini mimeno. Something. It says there's something over there about tamei as well. Okay. Okay. Man Tana de Palagalad Rabbi Akiva. Who is the actual Tana that argues with Rabbi Akiva about the status of an Aral? Let's say Tana de Rabbi Yossi Abavli. Tana de Rabbi Yossi Abavli. It's the Tana of Rabbi Yossi Abavli. I guess it means the teaching of Rabbi Yossi Abavli. Rabbi Yosef Abavli. Yeah. this is not the Rabbi Yossi that we're familiar with, and it's not the Rabbi Yosef that we're familiar with, because Rabbi Yosef, that's an Amira. This is a Tana by the name of Yosef Abavli, Rabbi Yosef Abavli. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Sreifas Einin U'Mechusar Kippurim Kshera. We're talking about the burning of the red heifer. If it's done by an Einin, or if it's done by a Mechusar Kippurim, someone that did not offer a sacrifice, it's kosher. It's kosher. Rabbi Yosef Abavli Amar Einin Ksher Mechusar Kippurim Psula. An Einin is kosher, but Mechusar Kippurim is pasal. Yeah, it doesn't tell me exactly what I wanted to hear. He doesn't say clearly what we're looking for. We're looking for the aral. And what about an aral? What status does he go? Is he tamei? But because he says that an einin is kosher to burn the paraduma, but a Mechusar Kippurim not, Tanakama de Yosef Abavli. So Rabbi Akiva would hold that the Mechusar Kippurim is pasal. Yeah, I didn't analyze this properly. What's happening here is that Rabbi Akiva is following Yosef Abavli, and who argues with Rabbi Akiva? It's the Tanakama that argues with Rabbi Yosef Abavli, because they said that Mechusar Kippurim, someone that's missing the lacking the sacrifice, is allowed to be involved in the red heifer. So if that's the case, that small status of impurity is not a problem, so therefore an aral will also not be a problem. That's what we're associating, even though it doesn't say. We're looking for an aral, which doesn't say in this. We're just making an assumption that if Rabbi Yosef Abavli doesn't allow a Mechusar Kippurim, and Rabbi Akiva doesn't allow an aral, that's probably the same opinion. And so the one that argues with Rabbi Yosef Abavli probably also argues with Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Now we have an opinion that clearly answers the question that we asked of Rav Sheshes. Is an aral, someone that's uncircumcised, allowed to eat from Ma'aser Sheni? It says V'af Rabbi Yitzchak savar aral aser b'Ma'aser. Rabbi Yitzchak clearly holds that an aral is not allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni. Damar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Minayin la'aral she'aser b'Ma'aser. How do we know that an aral is not allowed to eat Ma'aser? It says Nemar mimenu b'Ma'aser. It says the word from it. Mimenu means from him or from it, right?
Yeah, it says it.
From it. Yeah. The Nemar mimenu b'Pesach. It also says mimenu by the Korban Pesach. Well, Mami Meno Amar Pesach Aral Asabay, that we know clearly. Just like by the Korban Pesach, an aral is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach uncircumcised, that says in the Psukim. And it says the word Mimenu. Saf Mimenu Amar B'Maiser Aral Asabay. We have a Gzer Shava.
Do you know what we're referring to here?
Yeah. The Mimenu by the Korban Pesach was Leisechal Mimenu Na. Don't eat from it raw. And by the Meiser, it says Le'achalti mimenu be'oini b'tamei. Le'achalti mimenu b'tamei.
Is this word mimenu unique? Is it extra?
Yeah, the Gemara is going to discuss if it's an extra. That's when you learn the Gzer Shavas often, you know that question's showing up.
I mean, it's because there's also light.
Right.
So unless the word is unique or extra, then how can you learn from it?
Right. The problem is that if the comparison is perfect, then you almost don't need the word. Because what I mean, if the cases would be a perfect comparison, you don't need the word. The problem is that you never really have a perfect comparison because there's always something different. And then we say, well, if it's not perfect, then we have to have, there has to be extra. An extra would be teaching me something. Okay, so that's what we do. Now we look for the extra. Mufni. You have to say that it's extra. The word mimenu. Mimenu is confusing in grammar because the dot in the nun, the dagish in the nun, makes it, the nu at the end of the word makes it mean him. Without the dot, it means us. And mimenu could mean from him or from us. It doesn't follow the rules perfectly like the other ones do. Is that the issue? Is it the segel before?
Segel normally doesn't need to be closed off. A tegel with the cork and closed off with a dot, if you want. Like in men.
No. And that's the problem.
Weird.
That's the problem. So because of that, the dagish in the nun doesn't tell me the him, the singular, as it does to the as it usually does. As mimenu could mean from us. And you never know because of that issue. Okay. Whatever the case is. It's extra. The Eli Mufni, if it's not extra, Ikla Mifrach, we'll have the question. The comparison isn't perfect. Mala Pesach Shekin Chayav and Alav Mishum Pigel V'Nais V'Tamei. Korban Pesach is much stricter. That's why an Aral is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. You're going to tell me the same thing is going to apply to Meiser? Korban Pesach, if the person has the wrong thought, it becomes Pigel. If he leaves it over, it becomes nicer. If he's Tamei, can't eat from it. I don't think the Tamei was meant to be there. But anyway, that goes together. Nice Pigel, nice for Tamei. Because Tamei wasn't supposed to eat from Meiser Sheni either. So the Gemara says, you're right. Afnui mufni. It is clearly extra. My mufni, which is extra. Amarav Amrabitzchak Tlasami Menuksivi Pesach. Rava says that Rabbi Yitzchak says that it actually says 3 times the word mimenu. Chad legufe. What are the 3 times? It says Al teichel mimenu na, leisisir mimenu ad baiker, va'anaiser mimenu ad baiker beish tisarif. Right, that's what it says. So 3 times mimenu. Chad legufe. 1, because it's got to say it once. All right. Don't eat from it. One of them is a gzer shava that we're looking for. It's extra. And the other one, it depends. We have 2 opinions, and we'll explain what it is according to each opinion. See, it says that you're supposed to burn. It says you're not supposed to leave over until morning. Now, whenever it says do not in the Torah, that means that there's a lashes. Negative prohibition incurs lashes, with the exception, a few exceptions, but one of them is that if it then tells you how to correct it, then you don't get lashes. It's a lav hanitik lasei. You have an asay that corrects the lav. So it's not the lashes that's going to correct it. You have to fix it up to correct it. So what does it tell me? What's left over, you have to burn. The negative prohibition was do not leave over. The positive comes to tell me. So it's coming to tell me, it had to tell me v'hanaiser. So I did the ksiv noiser, ksiv nami mimenu. So that word it's not extra. It had to say it because it needed to say the next phrase. There was another opinion. Other opinion says that v'hanaiser mimenu ad baiker beish tisarif is coming to teach me that on Yom Tov, I'm not allowed to burn it. I have to wait till the following morning to burn it. Yeah. In other words, the Korban Pesach was not supposed to be left over all night. If it was left over all night, then you're supposed to burn it. When do you burn it? So ein sarfin kachim b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to burn it on Yom Tov. And so it says, what's left over until the morning, you burn it. What it's coming to tell me is that not that morning, but you burn it the following morning. You have to wait one more day. So I did since it has to say that until the following morning that you have to burn it. So it also says what's left over from it until the following morning, that's what you burn it. So once it had to give me the beginning of the phrase, so it gives me also mimeno. Whatever the case is, it says 3 times mimeno by the Korban Pesach. Now, Talasa mimeno ksiva b'maiser, it also says 3 times the word mimeno by maiser. What does it say? Le'achalti mimeno, le'achalti ba'ini mimeno, le'biarti mimeno b'tameh, v'le'nasati mimeno l'meis. It says 3 times mimeno. So, chad l'gufei. One of them is because it has to say it once. Chad l'derabavo. Another one is coming to tell me that by the meiser, I wasn't supposed to have benefit from it when it's tamei. By truma, I had an exception. By truma, I was allowed to take shemen of truma, oil of truma that became tamei, not eat it, of course, but I'm allowed to use it as a fire to burn it as fuel. But I'm not allowed to do that for meiser, and I learned that from mimeno. Mimeno, I'm not allowed to use for tamei, but for truma, I am allowed to. That was the teaching of Rabbi Vo. Another one was for Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish, Amar Rab Samya, Minayan l'maiser sheni shenit mashmutal l'soichai. How do you know that you're allowed to shmear maiser sheni that became tamei? Says Shnemar v'leinasati mena l'meis.
You know, it's interesting. I'm sorry, we just shifted all to these from Eretz Yisrael because we're dealing directly with stuff in the base of Mikdash. Whereas up until now, all the
It was an
Mikdash
oral.
guys were all we were dealing with Babylonian.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because now you have Rav Yochanan, Rav Pablo, Reish Lakish, and we just paradigm shift to it.
You do have Rava here, though. Okay. You're only not supposed to give it on the corpse. Now, there's a problem over here. You see, it says, I did not feed the meiser to a corpse. Now, corpse don't eat.
Right.
So how's it possible that there was some sort of usage of this meiser for a corpse? The answer is because you could smear oil on the corpse. So which means that the oil wasn't put on the corpse, but it could have been used on the person. What type of oil would have been put on the corpse? Would have been tamei oil. Could have been tamei oil. But nevertheless, it's allowed to be used on a person. The tamei oil is allowed to be used on a person. It's a little confusing here because why would I not be allowed to burn it? Where did we say that you're not allowed to burn? You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to burn the oil of meiser sheni that became tamei. Say it over here. Where's Rabbi Vo Amar Rabbi Yochanan? Yeah. It says it was yesterday's daf. It says Le biarti mimenu betame mimenu ayat mevar avalat mevar shemen shel truma shenitma. Yeah.
Forgive me, but I listened ahead just so I follow that. This one to Rabbi Stefanski, his share from today, and because they were ahead of us, and he mentioned the story that the companies that make oil when they're stuck with tamei oil, something about that since that was supposed to be true or so much something that the Kohanim couldn't use it, but everybody else there could use it. And he was saying, like, when can you use tamei oil? When it goes to Congo, the Congo use it, then you can use it for something. He was going to burn tamei oil in the head. Something, some unusual. I didn't follow it, but now I understand.
Whatever it is, there's a confusion here between if you're allowed to burn the oil of Meiser Sheni that became Tameh, but you're allowed to, which seems like you're not allowed to. When it comes to smearing it on the body, that seems like you are allowed to.
I guess it's just not hectic. Why would you not be allowed to?
You're supposed to keep it tar. Kim Tameh, there was a problem.
Right, but you can't burn truma. You can't destroy hektish. But something not hektish, you can destroy it.
You're saying the burning issue. Okay.
That's the issue.
Okay. Okay. We're just saying what the word mimenu is telling us. So, Maskifla Marzutra says, how do you know that the way that we were understanding it is accurate, is correct? We were saying that the oil of Meiser is not allowed to be put on a corpse. That's part of what his statement is. I didn't use it on a corpse. Maybe it's not smearing the corpse with oil. Maybe what it means is I didn't sell the oil, buy tachrichim, and with the value of the oil, buy tachrichim and then use it, and then and you just use the value. How do you know? So it says, Amar Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua Mimenu Migufay. Mimenu tells me that you're not using value. You're using the item itself, and the oil cannot be turned. Well, what's it called? Polyester. You could turn it, but the oil itself cannot be used as the tachrichim. So we're talking about you have to use the item itself, not the value. Okay. Rashi Amar Leinasati Dumyad Layachalti. I did not give it to a corpse. Is similar to not eating it. Malahal migufay afkan migufay. Same idea. That it needs to be from the oil itself, the food itself, not the value of it. Okay. All we got over here.
Say Rav Huna. Sure.
Rav Huna Brei Rishua says mimenu means migufay. And Rav Ashi says that he's comparing eating it, which is itself, to not putting it on the corpse, which means that it itself, not the clothing. They're saying the same. The end result is the same. That it needs to be not. We're not discussing value here that's being exchanged. Whatever the case is, so far we came out that I have an extra pasuk an extra mimeno by the Korban Pesach. Bakati mufti mitzad. That's only still one side. According to the one that says that you can learn from an extra word on one side. With comparison here, you need to have two things. But if one is extra, that's good enough. But according to the one that says that if you have a question, it doesn't work. What are you going to do? The Gemara answers, that we said before, that truma oil is allowed to be used for, if it's tameh, you're allowed to burn it. That I don't have to learn from mimenu by Meiser. I have another source. If I can use it, if I can find another source for that, that will free up the mimenu, and then mimenu will be extra, and then I'll have a gzer shava, which will tell me about an aral. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravu, Amaidik Sevanihin in Satlacha, Shmers Trumaisai. I have given to you the guarding of my trumais. That you do something even with truma tameya. What do? Vam Rachmana Lacha. Lasati Lacha. Shalachati Lasaka Tachas Tapshilach. You're allowed to burn it and use it as fuel. Yeah, that was a Gemara Shabbos. Okay. So once I free up the mimeno, then I can use Gzer Shava, and that will tell me what Reb Yitzchak was teaching, that an aral is not allowed to eat the meiser. Why? Because an aral is not allowed to bring the Korban Pesach, eat from the Korban Pesach. And now we say V'chol Atmeim. Took us a while to get through this. We only did the first word of the Mishnah. It says ha'aral. That's what we spoke about for 4 pages. Now it says v'chol atmeim, and anyone that's tamei lo yachlo b'truma, should not eat truma. Minani mili. How do we know this? Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yochanan says name of Rabbi Yishmael. Amar kra ish mizera Aaron v'utzaro Esav. Quite clear in the pasuk. Any man from the sons of Aaron, from the descendants of Aaron, that is v'utzaro Esav, but kadashim la yachal, should not eat from the holies. And we say that was referring to truma. How do we know it's referring to truma? When you said mizera Aaron, so what could this be referring to? Something that all of Zera Aaron could have eaten from. Truma must be talking about truma because all the descendants of Aaron can eat it. Can't be a karban because the karban was not for the ladies. It's only mizichri kun aliyah belayla. It says bakadashim. Okay. Ve'ema b'chasav v'shaik. Maybe it's not referring to Kachi Kachim. Maybe it's referring to Kachim Kalim, lesser sanctity sacrifices, which they take off the thigh and the chest and they give it to the Kayanim can eat it, and any of the Kayanim, even the women. The Gemara says, Eina b'chizeres. We want to also include the lady the Bas Kayan that got married to a Yisrael, then goes back because she was widowed or divorced. She goes back to her father's house because she didn't have children. She's allowed to eat truma. She's not allowed to eat the chazav v'shaik. So when it says mizera Aaron, we want to include her also. And so it can't be talking about chazav v'shaik because then that would leave her out. Where it says, well, if you're worried about leaving people out, truma nami ain't a b'chalala. A chalala can't eat truma. We said that if she had relations with someone that would make her not eligible for a kayan, she becomes a chalala. She can't eat truma. When it says chalala lav zari d'Aaron, that's not even considered a descendant of Aaron. That's a big chiddush. It's not the way we learned things before. We learned the Rashi over there in Parshas Emor. It says Bnei Aaron hakayanim. Why does it say Bnei Aaron? To tell me that if Bnei Aaron, why hakayanim? Because they're not a chalal. So which meant that a chalal was Bnei Aaron. They just were chalal. They just were kayanim. Here we say they're not Zera Aaron. Okay. It says in that pasuk, it says that they can't eat from kachim until they become pure. How do you know that it means Herav Shemesh? Maybe it means they have to bring a sacrifice. Truma is Herav Shemesh. Sacrifice was for the other types of impurities, so zav or something. It says Lois al Kadaitach. Don't think that. The Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Bezav bal shtei riyas. We're talking about a zav that saw twice. What's the difference between a zav who sees once, twice, or 3 times? Well, once. What was that?
Diplopia.
What is diplopia?
You see twice.
Oh,
I'm just teasing you for
sight. Oh, had a good job. It's a good offer. Okay.
Right there.
Okay.
Only vacant.
Okay. So don't think that, because a zav that sees once is really not a zav. He's really only considered a carry. A zav that sees twice is a full zav, and he has to wait 7 days, but he doesn't bring a karban. A zav that sees 3 times have to bring a karban. So what the Tana de Rabbi Yishmael says, we're not dealing with a fellow that needs to bring a karban. We're dealing, he only saw twice. And it's a mitzayra that was only quarantined. He wasn't muchlat. He doesn't need a sacrifice. Similar to what else it says in the pasuk, that if he's tamei to a soul, just like someone that becomes impure to a corpse, he doesn't have to bring a sacrifice. Someone goes to a funeral, right? He gets the paradum, but he doesn't bring a sacrifice. So haninami the labnei kaparnenu. So the other impure people were also didn't have to bring a sacrifice. We're not dealing with that. So therefore, we're just dealing with truma, which is herav shemesh. It says until when is he allowed to eat bakadshim? When the sun sets. Okay, until it becomes pure. Gemara says, maybe that's just because that was the case. But if he is a bar kapara, not bar kapara as in the Tana bar kapara, he is a bar kapara with a kaf, then he has to bring his sacrifice. He has to wait before he can eat truma. In other words, when we said that, what's the time to recite the Shema when the Kainim can eat the truma, which is when the 3 stars, then maybe that would only be a kain that doesn't need to bring a sacrifice. Maybe a kain that needs to bring a sacrifice has to wait till tomorrow. Once he goes to the mikveh, he can eat his meiser. Once the sun sets after the mikveh, then he can eat truma. Hevi kapara, eichel bekadshim minalan. How do you know all of those 3 things? So Amar Rav Chizda Tlasakrai Ksivi. I have 3 verses. Ksiv, Layechel min akadshim kim rachatz b'sari b'mayim. One said all of these psukim, they could be a contradiction unless I can associate each pasuk with a different case. One pasuk says he can't eat from the holies until he goes to the mikveh. Harachatz tar sounds like after the mikveh he can. I have another pasuk. It says the sun sets, he's tar, and then he can eat. Obviously, it's not the mikveh; it's the sun setting. Then I have another pasuk. The kayin has to offer the sacrifice, and then he's pure. So it's not the mikveh, it's not the sun setting; it's a sacrifice. HaKetzad, how do you resolve all of this complications? Kan l'maiser, kan l'truma, kan l'kadshim. Each type of food over here has a different law. For meiser, it's the mikveh. For truma, it's the sun setting. And for kachim, it's the sacrifice that needs to be brought on the following day. Maybe it's exactly the opposite. Maybe truma is right away, and this is you're right. How do you know that it's the way that we set it up? Mistabra truma difa. Probably truma is stricter than meiser because shekain machbaz. This was an acronym that we had yesterday. Machbaz, we said, stood for very good. Misa, Chaimesh, Pidyon, and Zar. Incurs a death penalty if he eats it when he's tamei. He has to pay an extra 5th. He can't redeem it, and the Zar is not allowed to eat it. So, okay, those are the 4 things. The Gemara says, Adarabba Meiser Di for Shekain Hadas Tab. We have a new acronym now. Hadas stands for you have to bring it to Meiser. You have to bring it to Yerushalayim. You have to say
take like the first letter. And...
the first letter, yeah, but sometimes it's the second. Like the dalet over here is the vidui. It's the dui. It's the, and then the samach is not the it's that it's asur la'inen. Asur. You take the samach. You take the consonant, I guess. Yeah. Test is it when he's tamei, he can't eat it, and also it needs beer, which you don't have by truma. So truma he can't eat when he's tamei either. That's a funny one. Any comment on that test? The Gemara says, "Afilo achi misa difa." Misa, even though it looks like there's more items by Meiser, but nevertheless Misa is stronger. Misa, which means truma, is stricter because if someone eats truma incorrectly when he's tamei, there's a very strict punishment. On the other hand, Meiser doesn't have that strict punishment. Rav Amar b'lei Misa difanami lematzasamre. I don't need to use that answer. I can give you another answer. Amar kar nefesh. Eze davar sheshav b'chol nefesh avayim zeh Meiser. I have the pasuk that says nefesh ki imrachatz b'sarei. It says nefesh kisiga. Anyone that will touch must be that who can eat this food. If it's anyone, then it has to be meiser because truma is only allowed to be eaten by the kohen. The Gemara says, "Vakati hanimi lehechad lap by kapara, but lehechad by kapara demaisi kapara." How do you know that the same law is going to apply if someone that was very tamei, that he can't just go to the mikveh? Maybe he actually has to wait for the sacrifice. Amar Abai Trei Kroik Siva, I have two verses. V'yoledes, by the woman that gives birth, that she does need to bring a kapara. Over there it says, Ad malaisi meitara, until her days of purity are up, which means if she gave birth to a male, to a boy, then it's 7 days plus 33 days, which is a total of 40 days. If she gave birth to a girl, then it's 14 days plus 66 days, which means a total of 80 days. Ad malaisi meitara, something happens when those days are over. Given Shemali Yamel Tahira. Once those days are up, she's tar. But she's considered a Tvelas Yaim. Usually a man goes to the mikveh and he waits for nightfall. In the interim, he's called a Tvul Yaim. This woman goes to the mikveh after she gives birth, and she waits for 33 days, and she's called a Tvul Yaim until the nightfall of the 33rd, which is the 40th day now. Uksiv, but I have another pasuk that says, that the kohen has to bring the sacrifice. Okay, how is this? Kan l'truma, kan l'kachim. There's a difference between what the person is eating. Don't tell me that if it's a yoledes, a woman that gave birth, who needs to bring a sacrifice, she's not allowed to eat any karbanos until she brings the karban. But not only that, she's not allowed to eat truma also until she brings the karban. Says no. She's allowed to eat truma even before she brings the karban. Why? Because it said, "An malaisi mei tahara." What's the significance of telling me that the days of her purity are up if there's no halacha that it's relevant for? It must mean that she's allowed to eat truma at that point, even before the sacrifice. The Gemara says, "Ve'ipachana." Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe truma has to wait for the sacrifice. It says, "Mistabra kodesh chamer shkein pankekes." That was the acronym that we had. Pigel, Naisatami, Mila, Karis, Vasalainen. We had a whole bunch of things that are much stricter about a karban. It says, which we said before, has 4 things. Well, we said that has 5, 6. It says, Hanach Nefishin. Sacrifices are more. You have 6. 6 to 4. 6 to 4. Rava Amar, Rava says, I don't need the 6 to 4. To tell me that the karbanos are stricter, because it says the kohen purifies her and she becomes pure. Obviously, she was tamei. And if you're talking about kachim, ikri kan va'abasa shiga b'chol tamei le'yochal alashmamina b'truma. It says if kachim she's allowed to eat at nightfall, truma she has to wait for the following day, so then it's going to create a problem because she's considered tamei until the sacrifice. So how is she allowed to touch the kachim if she's considered tamei? It must be that for the kachim she has to wait for the sacrifice, but the truma she was allowed to eat by night. Maskefler of Shesha Breder Avidi. Truma Ksiva Hacha. Can you tell me that the truma was talking that this is what we're talking about by the woman that gives birth? Vatanya Dabrel Bnei Yisrael. It says, speak to the Jewish people, Ainli Ela Bnei Yisrael. And the Brisa tells me. How do you know that it's more than just the Bnei Yisrael? How do you know that they also become tummy if you give birth? If a Gyaris gives birth, if a Shifcha, if a maidservant gives that was redeemed, that was freed, how do you know that she's also tummy? Talmud Leimer Isha. Says a woman. And if you're telling me that this parsha is talking about truma, is it possible that we're dealing with a giyaris and a shifcha? It's impossible for them to ever eat truma. They're not allowed to marry a kohen. They can't be a bas kohen. How are they supposed to eat truma? It can't have a giyaris a bas kohen. Oh. No.
If he married a guy, but I guess he loses his.
No.
He loses his kuna.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
No, he doesn't lose his
He
kahuna.
loses his privileges in kuna. He doesn't get truma.
Yeah, but that would be rabbinic. But the daughter would not be associated with him because it wouldn't be considered the father. Because she needs to convert, right?
Right.
Amar Rava. Maybe by a Levi, there was such a concept. Sure. Amar Rava. So Rava says, the lie, it's not so. The Rabbi said Truma. It says in that section, it says that she's not supposed to touch Kodesh, also Truma. So obviously we're talking about Truma here as well. So how does it work if it's dealing with the Geiris? Elakra mili mili kachashiv. You don't have to say that the whole parsha is talking about everyone. You can divide this parsha up, psukim, psukim. So this pasuk was talking about the woman that's a Geiris. This pasuk was talking about touching the Truma. It doesn't have to be the same woman that we were talking about before is going to be in the following pasuk. We're learning separate halachas from each of these psukim. Okay, let's leave it over here.